Welcome everyone to the None of Our Businesses podcast and YouTube show. In this segment, we're going to be interviewing our honored guest, Lisa Rivet. Lisa, you and I have known each other for, a decade at this point, right? I think. We met when I was, young, and I didn't know much. I was coming into PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was a CPA already. But I came in as a senior accountant at PricewaterhouseCoopers in the tax group there. And I actually think you moved from Boston to the Portland office where I joined almost at the same time.
It was the same time.
So yeah, we were both new to the Portland office at the time. And I had an amazing 4.5 years growing my career there. And I always appreciated the work that we did together. As I moved to manager, we had more opportunities to work together on operational issues and staffing issues and things like that in the firm. And I had the pleasure of staying in contact after I left the firm. And then I left probably 2007, getting into 2008. You left shortly after that as well.
I did. It's the end of 2008.
Yeah. Yeah. So now as of today, you run your own HR strategy consulting firm, and you're working with a variety of businesses. I just thought you'd be the perfect guest to come on and talk about not only some of the HR strategy experience you have, but also because you are your own business now, the challenges of being a small business entrepreneur. And so thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So HR Influence serves small to medium-sized businesses with an HR strategy, and that encompasses operations, hiring, firing, compensation, training, retention, evaluations, risk. So I give the business owners a perspective from an HR lens.
Mm-hmm. What would your typical client look like then?
Typical is 25 and under, but I've done companies as big as 80 and 90
people.
Because after 50, usually they have somebody in-house.
Okay.
There's a lot of companies, HR usually will fall to somebody who has capacity. Mm-hmm. It falls under accounting. Mm-hmm. An admin who has it.
Accountants hate that, by the way.
Well, I totally get it. So I get brought in a lot by the CFO.
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't want to do it. Or the receptionist or an admin or somebody in the company who's not trained ends up doing the bare minimum of that function. And a lot of things get missed.
Sure. Yeah. So you also mentor kind of in-house, somebody who's been designated as the in-house HR person, right? So maybe it's a slightly bigger company and they have somebody that maybe wants to do HR or is an office manager or something that is de facto doing the HR. And so that's another part of what you do, right? You might be mentoring that person.
And that's the best model. If they have somebody there so that I can teach them what they need to do, mm-hmm. right? And so once I teach them and we get everything in place up front, I'll continue working with management or the leadership team. Mm-hmm. But having somebody there who's there on a daily basis to do a lot of things is super helpful. That's the best model to work with.
Mm-hmm. And you work across a variety of industries in terms of the type of client. Is there any particular industry that you're targeting or looking for at this point?
I don't target necessarily. My career was in professional services with a niche in public accounting.
Sure. Yeah.
I know the environment. I know billable hours. I know the challenges. So that's near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. I should target them. But I've done restaurants, retail, manufacturing, all kinds of different industries.
Yeah, I know it's funny you say maybe you should target them, but I feel the same way because a lot of times I've had a body of experience in a certain area, and a lot of times it's like, okay, that was cool, but now I want to try and do something else, or I have a perspective on a different area or a different industry that I'd like to work more in. And I think that should be okay. I don't think we should be pigeonholed into just the industry that we happen to be working with before, particularly if the skill set of the profession that we're bringing to bear is not necessarily industry specific.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like learning. I love learning about the different businesses. And when I did manufacturing, I had to learn the business. And I did. And after that, I had another conversation with another business, and he could tell from the questions I asked, I knew what I was talking about. And I wouldn't have been able to do that prior.
So that kind of inspires a different question I thought in my mind about differences in working with different kinds of employees, because I think in the professional service realm, you're dealing with a lot of what people might call the white collar kind of higher paid professionals. Depending on the kind of manufacturing, you may be dealing with a lot of lower wage employees that you're having to manage, along with maybe just a greater variety, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's not all just one thing.
Right.
Tell us about that. How is that?
That was a transition. I went from hiring all college grads, best of the best, 4.0 overachievers, to adjusting to industries where it was a transient workforce, like in restaurants or retail. So you're not so much looking for longevity. It's an hourly wage. It's a different mentality. The expectations are different. That was an adjustment. And at the end of the day, all employees want to be paid fairly, treated fairly, valued and appreciated. That piece of it doesn't change. It doesn't matter what they do.
Yeah. You mentioned that your focus is on the HR strategy, and you kind of listed out some of those components, but I'd like to hear more about what that means, what strategy means, as opposed to, say, compliance.
Right. Two different things. And my career wasn't spent in the compliance realm. I do handbooks and I know the laws, but that's not where I spent my career in that expertise. It was more on the soft skills, was more on the operations and actually dealing with the people issues. But planning for the management side, who's your management team? Who's your number two? Do you have succession planning? Most don't, right? They don't want to think about it or talk about it, or they don't even know where to start. So there's the management piece of it, who's running the business and is there planning going on? The hiring and firing, the talent management strategy, there's so much more to it than posting and going through resumes. There's a lot of nuances in recruiting that are underestimated and not known, and you really can't know about it till you do it. So I teach that so that they don't need me every time. They can do it themselves, right, and do a better job, because hiring is so critical. It's the training, that orientation and training piece, which is so underestimated and undervalued. On day one, especially nowadays, you have to lay out their career path. You have to make sure that they feel welcomed, that they're trained, that expectations are set, that you're reiterating the mission, vision, values. It's getting that workforce and how you're going to either execute on the services you provide or the products that you make that align with the mission, vision, values. And a lot of times I'm just bringing that to their attention. I'm bringing that to the forefront and reminding the owners, and you have to make that part of your walk and talk every day.
I imagine when you get in, you talk about the mission, vision, values. I imagine when you get in to do the work to align their strategy with that, you probably often find that in a small business, maybe they don't have those well defined to begin with. So does your consulting kind of veer into that?
It can. Absolutely. If they don't have it, we'll spend time on that, right? I've helped develop that, and it forces them to think about it, and it forces them to think differently. So it's a good exercise. Even if they have one, it's always good to revisit it.
Yeah. And how much, I think, listening to some of what you're talking about in terms of HR strategy, it sounds like it also would inevitably get into the operations management of the company. How often does that happen, and where does that go? What does that look like for you?
It's all tied together.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at employees and what they do and how they do it, you can't help but get into operations because I'm looking at process and procedures. I'm looking at efficiencies. I'm looking at who's doing what. Are they the best person to do that job? Is there duplication? Is there role definitions? Do they know what they're supposed to be doing? And they all have to work together and tie together to meet the strategy, to meet the end goal.
I think the light bulb that just came on for me on that point is that, I guess if a company is very person intensive, and we all say, "Oh, our people are our business," but obviously in some businesses you're selling a thing, and in some businesses it's about the intellectual output of the workforce. So it seems like your law firms, your accounting firms, your consultancies, your advertising agencies, and so on, the intellectual output of the workforce is the product. It's so important. And I think the light bulb that just came on to me is that, well, in that context, that HR strategy is operations. That they are totally inseparable, because
right.
there's not like a thing where you can look at the operations management of how to build the widget some different way or more efficiently. You're talking about how to best deploy and manage your primary resource and asset, which is the intellectual capacity of your team. Yeah, that's
because if you have your star performers and they're producing, that's great, but you also have to make sure, are they happy? Are they going to stay? Are they continuing to develop and grow? You're looking at your next leaders. Are they mentoring those underneath them? There's so much more to it that a lot gets missed.
Yeah, it's asset management.
Yes.
Kind of in a maybe a funny way to say it. So, it seems to me there's a certain irony that small professional service firms don't often invest in HR when they would probably be, like, as we're talking about, that is like the most important asset they have, and that is their operations.
Right.
What do you think explains that paradox?
HR is overhead.
Yeah.
HR is overhead, number one. Number two, there's so many myths and misperceptions of what HR is. So most people don't understand the value that HR can do. The history, we're looked at as, the no fun police. We're the rules people. We're the no, you can't do this, you can't do that. No. I don't believe I function that way. I like to have a lot of fun, but it's not critical in their thought process when they're starting a business. You have to have accounting, right? And payroll and IT. You can get away with not having HR, but what happens is I get brought in after the fact.
Yeah.
So now we have to spend time fixing, right? Instead of getting it right from the get-go.
Well, it sounds very like what you say, you can get away without having HR in the short term. It's like my wife and I have a rental property portfolio, residential rentals, and yeah, we could get away without maintaining the properties for a period of time. Right?
You can't sustain it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So yeah, it feels very much like that to me. Yeah. Take us back to the beginning of your career, because I actually don't know this about you, even though you and I have known each other for a while now. I don't think I know how you actually got started in the HR field to begin with, why you chose that path.
Well, when I started working, HR wasn't a career. HR wasn't a degree you could get. It was personnel, and it was very transactional. You were doing all the forms, right? You were doing all the administrative part. I kind of came into it through office management and production. Production is where I learned my project management skills in a PR firm. And I continued that with office management, which includes HR. And I kept falling back into the HR and recruiting arena. And I came to a crossroads where I needed to choose. And there were elements of recruiting I liked, but I didn't want to do it full time. So I went HR, and probably at the time I didn't even know what that meant. And I was recruiting with Coopers & Lybrand in 1998. I had just had my first child, and Coopers & Lybrand and Pricewaterhouse merged July 1st, 1998. So I got hired as a PwC employee in San Francisco, and it was in recruiting, and that was great. And then I had my second child, and my husband's from Boston, so we transferred with the firm to Boston. And that's when I had to choose recruiting or HR, and they had a large compliance tax practice that nobody internally wanted to support. So they had to get somebody from the outside. So I totally oversold myself to be a tax HR manager. And it was phenomenal. I was 4 years in this huge market surrounded by an amazing HR team with mentors. And that's kind of where I learned not just, all the functions of HR, but the business side of things, because we were responsible for scheduling and analyzing the utilization reports, and we helped run the day-to-day operations with the partners. Mm-hmm. So I loved that because it challenged me. And I consider myself a business person first, HR second.
Sure.
So it's good to marry that. And a lot of HR professionals don't make the transition from transactional functions to strategic. And I feel very fortunate that I had the training and the opportunity to do that. After, sorry, I'm going to continue.
Yeah,
10 years at PwC. In 2004, we came back home to Portland. So I transferred to the Portland office and was able to bring everything I learned there to a smaller office. Thought I would retire there. I loved it. Loved the firm, loved the training, loved everything about it. And they restructured in 2007. I stayed. And then I actually left in 2008. And I can remember in 2007 and 8 when I was thinking about it, it was such a big company and we had national spoon feeding us, right? Here's what you need to do. And it's also where I learned to question national, mm-hmm. right? And question things and not just take everything at face value. But I can remember feeling, if I go to another position and I'm not spoon-fed, if I'm on my own, I won't know what to do. And by 2008, it's like I knew what they should be doing and they weren't doing it. At least I felt that way. Sure. And so I was ready. And I wasn't happy and I couldn't, you can't recruit when you don't believe in it. So it was a very hard decision to leave and I left. And so that was 10 years ago. And I have had several positions since then, and other public accounting firms, a financial services firm. And for a while I was beating myself up because I had so much longevity, 5 years, 10 years, and then 2, 3, less, whatever. But as I got through those 10 years, there was such value in having that exposure and those different experiences and seeing different businesses and different cultures that really enabled me to do what I do today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the longevity is an interesting thing because it's something that I've seen a lot, that professionals will, they'll start out their career with a lot of years at one or two places early on. And then after they develop some professional executive skills, their tenures start to be shorter and they move around to some different places for shorter periods of time, unless they kind of find that forever place, which sometimes happens too. But I've kind of thought, in a sense, at least in my own experience, that especially when you're working with small businesses, is that there is a practical life cycle to the work that we're doing. And we go in and we fulfill our mission and then we leave and we pass it off to either other professionals or we pass it off to inside managers and executives, and they kind of take over what we're doing and go from there. And part of it is probably just the economics of it, because as we develop a certain skill set, the rate that we command is too high for a lot of small businesses to sustain long term. They're the only people who are making that rate on a regular basis are the very top executives or perhaps the owners themselves. And so that kind of pushes it into the short term do some work, do some consulting, and leave kind of situation. So you talked earlier about talent development, and we were talking about how important it is to manage talent as an asset. And can you distill some of your experience in that area down to some key best practices? Is that even possible?
I can try. I think it starts with, finding the right fit, right? You have to find, most companies, not most, I run into where they haven't even defined their profile, right? So they're hiring someone, and I used to see it more often where, here's the job description, but they meet somebody who doesn't hit it all, but they're awesome, right? Yeah. And they're going to make it work because they're so awesome. And what's their skill set? Well, I don't know, but they're awesome, and I'm going to hire them anyway and try and make it work. And it's not going to, because they can't fulfill what needs to be done.
They think they need to. They think they have to get that person on the bus, right? That's from the Maxwell writings, that you want to get the right person on the bus and then find something for them to do. But it sounds like you don't necessarily agree, that doesn't ring true with you entirely.
Not in a small business. You don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have the luxury. I would say a best practice is for hiring managers or business owners that are doing the hiring. We look at the lens through our experience and who we are. And we'll meet somebody that we connect with in those 30 minutes or 60 minutes. And it's like I connect with them and they're like me, and we're wired the same and we see the world the same, but that's not what you need. You don't need another you. Right. You need somebody who's going to complement you, and somebody who's going to have different strengths than you do and maybe think differently than you do, so that you're a better team together.
Yeah, I find that. Yeah, that rings very true to me. I mean, that's what I valued about some of my team members. Well, that's what I value about all my team members, is what I most highly value is the strengths that they have that I don't have, particularly in the work that we do. I'm usually hiring very highly experienced people, folks with over a decade of experience each. And sometimes I have to pinch myself because I'm guilty of putting my own emotions on them about various tasks that we may have to do or things that we may have to deal with in a client situation, and that I may not be myself particularly good at. My core reaction is, when I'm not particularly good at something, to try to protect my team from those things, because I'm not good at it and I don't like it. I assume they would be the same, but then I realize sometimes they're actually pretty good at those things, and they don't actually mind doing them. And so at that point I realized, well, gee, I may as well just let them handle it. They're not worried about it, and so I should just step back, keep my mouth shut, and not worry about it, because they're not, and the way they're going to handle it is probably better than I would have handled it. And that's just magic. That's what I love about the possibility of a good team, is when they can contribute in a way that offsets the weaknesses that I have too.
I love that one.
It changes how you look at things.
Yeah.
And how you interview.
Yeah. Well, again, I want to thank you for joining me today,
Thank you.
Lisa.
And to our audience, thank you for joining us. And we're going to jump into our roundtable next.
All right, can we move on to ghost stories now?
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm excited.
So my topic for this week, or my article for this week, is actually a lighter one. Halloween was last week. I don't know when this will get released, but Halloween was last week. So I saw an article. It was written by Barbara Swenson, and it's called Haunted Workplaces. And it was just a fun, kind of clickbaity article on different haunted business locations. She gave a couple of the Washington D.C. one of the libraries is supposedly haunted, and in fact they have a camera on it at all times, and they have historical footage of this ghost that usually appears in the kids' room. I don't know, it throws books or whatever. And then they, the Queen Anne, they had a couple other ones. But I thought it would be an interesting way to ask if anybody here has any personal ghost stories to share with the group.
I wish.
Yeah, I'd say no, absolutely not.
Well, you guys are in luck, because I actually have three. One of them was one of them I thought it was a ghost, but it was not a ghost. And the two other ones are, I will say, potential ghost encounters. So I'll start with the one that I thought was a ghost story, but it actually turns out it was not a ghost. So I was, this was back when I was in college the first time, when it was much more fun. But I was sitting down at it was night, and I came home from work. I was working as a pizza delivery driver, and I got myself a glass of water, and I sat down and I put the glass of water onto the table where I was at, and I had a tempered glass top table. So I put the glass down on the table, and I was watching TV, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see the glass turn 180 degrees and slide like this, about that far. And I remember I was watching Ghost Hunters at the time. This is like when Ghost Hunters was first on.
Of course.
And I jumped up and I was like, oh my God, I'm haunted. What I failed to realize is that the glass table was slightly slanted and that the glass had sweat. And the weight of the glass caused it to turn first underneath with the water under it and move. But for a good 15 minutes, I was convinced that my house was haunted.
Oh, I'm glad that was the answer, because if you were going to tell me you believed that was a ghost, I was
You were gonna call bullshit on
Well,
that.
we were going to have a heart-to-heart right now
about how gullible I am.
about the fact that there are no such things as ghosts.
Oh, all right. Well, let me get to my next one. That was an actual ghostly experience,
Okay.
or that I believe is a ghostly experience. I should preference this by saying that I'm a pretty pragmatic guy, and I always look for a scientific or like a reasonable explanation. I'm not a believer. I don't think aliens are visiting or trying to probe me or anything. So,
Maybe.
I don't know.
Are we
One
sure?
wishes. No. So my grandmother passed away when I was in high school, and I inherited her car. And so, again, I was in college. This was in Tucson. And I was delivering pizzas for a living while I was going to school. And so this is back in the beginning of cell phones. There were no Google Maps. I had a Nokia, and it would spit out Yahoo directions for where you were going in a list. So you'd have to read the list of directions and figure out where on this list you were to make the turn to get where you're going. So I'm driving down the road in Tucson, and I'm looking at my phone, and I hear a disembodied voice say, "Stop." And I look up and I slam on the brakes because I'm about, 20 feet from a car.
So wait, it wasn't a regular voice. It was a
disembodied.
disembodied voice.
Yeah, nobody is in my car with me, and I hear "Stop."
What makes it disembodied, though?
It didn't have a body.
Oh, okay.
So
How scary
there's
that
nobody.
is.
Okay.
There's nobody. There's nobody in the car with me. So
Okay, all
there's
right.
no other body to say stop, and it wasn't me,
Okay.
and it wasn't the pizza Tyee.
Okay. All right.
So,
Carry on.
All right.
so I thought, wow, that's weird. I kind of got the goosebumps, and I ended up not hitting the car, and I pulled the pizza out, and there's nothing wrong with the pizza, so I thought it should have been smashed up, and I said, wow, that's weird. Whether or not it was a ghost, I don't know. I was right next to a cemetery.
Oh. Uh-huh.
I don't
All
know.
right. So it wasn't the radio.
It was not the radio. The radio was not on. In fact, it didn't
Nobody
work.
was in your cell phone.
When
Nope.
you stopped, nothing happened.
The cell phone was off. I just had it was just text, message. My
Yeah.
windows were up, so it was nobody yelling stop and there was no sidewalk on that side of the street where I was at, so there was
Yeah.
nobody around me.
Yeah.
Wasn't a feature in the early Yahoo directions.
No.
No. It wasn't
This was
that.
an 87 Corolla, so it had no type of early collision warning detection. So that's ghost story number 1.
2.
And whether or not, or 2, the real ghost story
Okay.
1.
Gotcha.
So the next ghostly encounter I had.
Well,
Hold on.
I feel-
You want to respond
I
to this?
just feel compelled to point out that it's possible that the voice was in your head, right?
Well, it's also possible I was delivering pizzas and I was 20 years old and I was probably really high and heard somebody say,
Yes.
stop.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another
There
possibility.
we go. There we go. Okay.
And my memory could be flawed from that 20 years ago, and much has happened in between.
And you
Then
never
I may
checked
not-
under the car, did you?
We're rolling, so I don't know. Somebody wants to climb onto the bottom
I
of
should've
a
known.
87 Toyota Corolla and can fit that ground clearance. More power to them, but no, I didn't check under the car.
I was thinking more like that's the person yelling stop right before they.
Oh, the person stuck underneath
yeah,
the car.
guy who
Yeah.
ordered the pizza.
No, they never caught me for that one. No,
All right. All right.
I want you to know, for just the audio listeners, Tyee is sideways looking at me and does not believe a word I'm saying here. So the next one was, and this is more recent. I was on a nonprofit board for a local museum, And the museum has a location that's actually it's by Rock Creek campus. And so we're there. It was not our main location. We moved from another location into that location. So we're having the first board meeting that we're having in there. It's late at night, and all the board members are together. And all of a sudden it sounds like there's a crawl space or like a storage space, like much like an attic above this that they use for record retentions. And so it sounds like something fell over, just bam, just a really loud bang. And then you hear what sounds like footsteps walking around upstairs, like in different areas of that area. And I asked, is somebody here? What is that? And the executive director at the time said, I don't know, I think it's haunted. And I was thinking, like, bullshit, let's go up there and look. It sounds like for sure like something has fallen over. And we went up and looked, and everything is perfectly in its where it should be. There's nothing out of place that should make that kind of noise. So then my next thought was, it must be the air conditioning system or like the heater ducts kicking on or something that's causing, a rattling or something that would cause you to hear that. Unfortunately, the HVAC system was not hooked up yet. So it couldn't have been the heating or cooling system. So, and this was not an isolated incident. Even after the HVAC was turned on and, we were there on a regular basis, we would meet monthly. Every month, whatever it was would make a bunch of noise while we were there. And I never heard those kind of noises when I was just visiting the museum during the day or at any other time. That one for sure, I have no explanation of what it could be. The disembodied voice when I'm driving could have just been in my head. But this is verifiable by 10 people in the room.
Multiple people
in the room. Everybody heard the same thing. And then investigation can't turn up anything that I can put a solid, like, what it was.
Are all those people who were in the room somehow incentivized by museum ticket sales?
No.
Okay.
And they were definitely not inebriated. So.
Well, old building, right? Could be plumbing.
Brand new building.
Okay. Well, I have nothing for you then if it's a brand new building.
Tyee's a believer at the end of this, Charlie.
You've convinced him. That's what it took. You did it.
I don't know. Like a couple of years ago in our house, in our master bedroom, at night we would get this scratching right above our bed, and it would only be at night, and we couldn't figure out what it was. At first, I thought it was maybe the air system because the air system in this house does make noises, and so I thought, okay, well, it's just a different version of those noises. But yeah, we'd hear this scratching and scurrying and everything, and it was squirrels. Squirrels had I didn't even know squirrels could do this. I mean, obviously, I never thought it was ghosts, but I thought, well, maybe rats or mice or something got into the walls. You Google that stuff and you find all the horrible things that it might be. I didn't realize that squirrels would actually burrow their way into your house, but we had the cheaper plastic covers over the air vents on the roof, and the squirrels had chewed their way through there in order to get into a spot where they could stay warm during the winter, essentially. Yeah. So
you're saying it was a squirrel ghost?
Yeah, I think it could be a squirrel, right? It sounds like you're thinking it would just be squirrels.
No, it was much a heavier step than that.
All right. Well, with that,
all right. I guess this is the last time we do ghost stories on here. Correct.
I think we can do ghost stories as long as it's clear we don't believe them.
I don't know. That's a tough
I'm not
sell.
sure that's clear.
Yeah. We'll see. We got a whole year until next Halloween to consider
listeners,
that possibility.
It was fun.
Yeah. No, I think I enjoyed hearing it. I enjoyed the sound effects.
Yes. It really brought me there.
Yeah.
It was deep. Like, we should have had a fire and like marshmallows or something. We should have shot this segment outside as like a scary ghost story.
We could do that, in that we've got we've got a fire pit in the yard that we can fire up next summer, next fall maybe,
and then we'll tell real ghost stories.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Somehow get our equipment out there around the fire.
I'll go ghost hunting for the rest of this year, and we'll come back with even more stories.
That sounds good. That sounds
Start
perfect.
fabricating my stories now. So I thought another. I don't have any personal ghost stories, but I have one thing that I've found interesting that I thought would fit here, which is that there is a house that I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with called the Winchester Mystery House, and basically what it is that Sarah Winchester, who was the wife of the firearm magnate William Wirt Winchester. Basically, when he died, she inherited his fortune, but she was convinced that all of the ghosts of people who were killed by her husband's rifles were haunting her, and so she decided that, as one does, that she needed to go ahead and buy a mansion, expand on it indefinitely in all sorts of confusing directions, and add a room for every ghost, and stairs that lead to nowhere, and hallways that just are there to confuse and throw off the ghosts.
Sounds like a small business entrepreneur.
Yes. And so yeah. So, I think it's a metaphor.
Right,
I really
yes.
think it is.
Yes, yeah.
And so, yeah, I just got a kick out of it. It's a historic house. It's still open today.
So like entrepreneurs that do this in the beginning, it haunts them for quite a while.
Yes. Yeah.
I will say one thing that I found interesting about that house, or like the concept behind it, right, is that if ghosts can move through walls and doors, how are you going to confuse them with the layout of the house?
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe her carpenters didn't, don't say anything. She's paying for this, so.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought about the feature of just like, okay, we got this far with the house. What should we do next? Oh, let's just add on this other piece and just kind of keep adding on to it in all kinds of random ways that in retrospect, you would have never done it that way had you planned it out ahead of time, right? And yeah.
Well, how stoked were you that would you be to be that contractor, right? Like, this lady's batshit crazy, and she has a bunch of money, and she's going to write me a bunch of checks, and I'll just have work forever.
She inherited the equivalent of $542 million in today's dollars. So just to put yourself in that contractor's perspective, just to give you an idea, she even had the foresight to build a floating foundation around it so that when the 1906 earthquake hit, it demolished all these other houses nearby, but she had it built in such a way so that it wasn't actually touching, the foundation wasn't connected, and so it survived this gigantic earthquake.
Wow. So there was something valuable there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The metaphors, yeah. I'm on the metaphors now,
right.
right? I'm on the metaphors to what we see in business, because it's like what you just said, right? How stoked would you be that contractor? That's like the accountant who's totally stoked to work for the company that has way too many subsidiaries. And,
Right.
It's like,
Or a chart of account like a mile long.
yeah, we've got this mile long chart of accounts with thousands of accounts, and we're breaking everything out into every possible category, whether it'll ever be used for planning or not.
There's a GL account for every check written.
Yes. Yeah. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work by the hour that we can bill for.
Every one of them needs to be reconciled to.
Exactly. Right.
Well, you can't have any financial problems if you can't understand your financials. So
Right. Yes.
that's the answer.
I'm just wondering if the earthquake would have killed the ghost, and she really missed out on an opportunity there to cut out the problem. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
If the walls will stop them, I mean, you drop the house around them. I don't know.
So what exactly was the attraction for the ghost? I mean, presumably, because I totally don't believe in this kind of crap.
Right.
Giving them a place to stay.
Well, you mean the attraction to the ghost, like why she thought the ghost would be haunting her?
Yeah. Why are they?
Because
they're following her specifically.
Because
not the
her
house.
husband made the gun that killed him.
Right.
And he's
okay.
dead now.
Yeah. So all
He's
the
one of
people
them.
that she never knew, but were either murdered or killed with the Winchester brand rifles or pistols.
And it totally makes sense that a person who was killed by a gun would get upset at the maker, and then therefore his wife once the maker dies.
Right.
Yeah.
In West Virginia, and made the trek to California to haunt this lady.
Yeah, of course.
Listen here.
What else would a ghost do? Yeah. These are
Right.
1906 ghosts. They don't have anything else to do.
So I guess so that would happen no matter where she lived. So yeah, she could try building in a less expensive location than California. Right?
Right. I mean, for instance, Nevada.
Right.
Or
yeah.
not Portland.
Right. Exactly.
Oh yeah. All right.
All
That was
right.
great.
Yeah. Thanks. Good
Just
one.
thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, that does it for the None of Our Businesses podcast, the podcast that talks about what really matters to your business. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and tell your friends about it so we can help grow this community. If you have any topics that you'd like for us to touch on, please leave a comment in the YouTube section. And you can always hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.